You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Branke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. But before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Subscribe to our daily newsletter and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us live every Thursday for, keeping it fresh. Join us in the
keeping it fresh.
Keeping it fresh. Join us in the comments section.
Our new tagline.
Yeah. Today in manufacturing.
Keeping it fresh.
Keeping it fresh for manufacturing.
David, you should turn your chair around and just have a rap session with the audience.
Yeah.
Like Saved by the Bell style. I feel like that's where we're going here.
That's all this podcast is, really, is, us at, what was the restaurant?
The Max.
We're at the Max having a rap session about manufacturing, which is a very relevant reference all of our young viewers are going to understand.
Of course.
Jeff, how you doing this week?
Awesome. How about you?
I'm doing good. It is hard, we're shooting this as the first few games of March Madness are happening, and it is kind of hard to get over the like muffled sounds. We thought this room was well insulated, but not insulated enough from March Madness.
Yeah.
So I just can hear my bracket dreams crumbling. Anna, how are you doing this week?
Good. Yeah, to your point, I feel like anyone who listens to this podcast during March Madness gets an extra point.
That's right.
We're keeping
points.
A point system.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean,
nobody knew.
Oh man, I do.
It's a secret point system.
Do you remember Jeff's arbitrary point system that he had back in the day, where he would just hand them out, taking a point, giving it like
David? That sounds like a serious HR type violation. I don't think I could do something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like Jeff.
I wouldn't put it on a whiteboard or anything.
No, there wouldn't be a whiteboard. There wouldn't be a belt.
No,
not at all.
No.
All right. Well, before we get started, we have a word from our new sponsor, Big Commerce. And we're back. And before we jump into that first story, just remember that Big Commerce provides modern e-commerce technology that works with your existing systems, ERP, OMS, CRM, no problem. Whatever existing business tools and technologies you use today, Big Commerce can integrate using pre-built one-click integrations or customize your automation with its APIs. Make the move to Big Commerce today. Our first story this week. Boeing receives order for up to 121 planes. On Tuesday, a pair of Saudi Arabian Airlines, an upstart and the country's flag carrier, announced plans to buy 78 jetliners from Boeing. The airlines will also take options to buy 43 more. At list prices, the combined deal would be worth about $37 billion. If the options are exercised. Always the caveat, airlines routinely get deep discounts. Terms of the deal were not disclosed. The deal is reportedly 3 years in the making. According to 2 senior U.S. administration officials, President Joe Biden did not directly lobby for the order when he met Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman last summer, but 2 aides made a pitch on Boeing's behalf. The deal will support about 1 million jobs in 44 states across the U.S. supply chain, including 150,000 new manufacturing jobs. Jeff, with Boeing, we're either getting great news or bad news, and this week, it was great news.
It was. I think it's interesting how the Biden administration, was sort of hands off on the negotiations here, but was very quick to point out all the economic benefits that are supposedly going to be coming out of this deal. I don't know, 150,000 new manufacturing jobs. That one kind of caught me. Like, how do they extrapolate that from this particular deal? That was interesting. But regardless, obviously good news for Boeing, especially when you consider the fact that, Airbus was not part of this. And a lot of these deals you hear about the Saudis or somebody else, whoever it is, so much went to Boeing, so much went to Airbus. This was all for Boeing. Now, in the fall, the Airbus did also land a deal with the Saudis, but it was about a third of what this is. So, 37 to 12. We don't know the exact terms, but it was larger. So good for Boeing there. It's also really interesting because I was curious as far as what are all these planes going to be used for? You don't think of Saudi Arabia as necessarily a huge passenger air travel economy, I guess you could say.
Outside of the royal family.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. Were these basically going to be used for their fleet of aircraft or something? But the Saudi government is putting almost like $100 billion into their tourism department and into aviation specifically to support that and get more people in tourism. They had like a $20 billion tourism economy last year. So it is growing there as well. You can see a lot of things opening up. This investment is going to obviously support a lot of those other investments they're making in aviation infrastructure. And again, trying to get more people to come and see their beautiful country. So
combined, this is a bigger deal than the $34 million that we had mentioned in mid-February, that Air India deal that Jeff was talking about, which was the plane maker's third largest in history. One thing that surprised me about this, Anna, was that Boeing, for whatever reason, released them separately. When Boeing released it, they released the one deal with Saudia, the flag carrier, and the one separately with the kind of startup. I wondered what their thinking was for that when they could have just come out and said, like, yo, all these planes, Saudi Arabia, it's going to be huge.
Yeah, I don't know exactly either. Maybe they wanted to meter out the good news so they could keep that narrative going for a while. I don't know, the news cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a really interesting story. The timing of it was pretty interesting to me as well. The article that we ran included a quote that I thought was pretty salient about the circumstances. It said, relatively high oil prices have boosted Saudi Arabia's economy and government, making it easier for the kingdom to close a multi-billion-dollar jet order. That might be the understatement of the century. As we learned earlier this week, Saudi Aramco, which is the country's government-owned oil producer. So Saudi Arabia has a 98.5% stake in that company. They revealed in a history-making announcement that that company had earned $161 billion last year in profit. In profit.
Yeah. It's a good year.
Yeah. Which was the highest ever recorded annual profit by a publicly listed company. The scenario, I think, there has been a little bit controversial. Some people have been taking the oil company to task about climate-related stuff. Also, things happening in Ukraine that have boosted the rates of oil for them to be raking in those profits. So the head of Amnesty International, Agnes Calamard, was quoted as saying, "It is shocking for a company to make a profit of more than $161 billion in a single year through the sale of fossil fuel, the single largest driver of the climate crisis." She added that it is all the more shocking because this surplus was amassed during a global cost of living crisis and aided by the increase in energy prices resulting from Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. So there's that. Not to mention, obviously, there's been some drama between the U.S. and the Saudis over OPEC cutting production, causing higher gas prices here in America over the last 2 years. To me, when I first saw this, and Jeff mentioned the Biden administration and whatever their role was in this, it seemed to me like maybe this deal with Boeing and not Airbus was in some ways an act of diplomacy. I know that the Biden administration was credited with kind of helping move this along, but they've denied that there were any strings attached. However, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, when this came out, said she called the deal, quote, "a fitting tribute to an economic partnership between our two countries now in its 8th decade." It kind of feels like maybe the Saudis are trying to smooth some things over here. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a factor. So, of course, it's working out great for Boeing, but I think there's a lot of kind of underlying conditions that maybe are influencing this taking place.
We just need to understand how cyclical this is, right? So, everyone complaining about high gas prices last year leads to 150,000 new supply chain jobs in the U.S., right?
It's coming back around.
Yeah.
It's coming back around.
It wound up. It's really It was our benefit.
It's a complicated web, guys, but
Yeah.
it's coming back.
Yeah, and the Biden administration doing everything to say, oh, yeah, we did that. We did that. Not that one thing. We didn't do that. We did everything else. And to have one larger number on top of yours for profit, Saudi oil revenues approached $326 billion last year.
Man.
So, I mean, to say that,
Good margin.
That is not bad.
Right?
Like, and to only dedicate it was a $20 billion tourism economy. I think, they're still going to stay in the oil business rather than.
Yeah, I would think so.
My only hesitation with this was that 49 787 Dreamliners are for Saudia. Now, that is the flag carrier. That's the airline that's been around for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
The new upstart, Riyadh Air, they're the ones that ordered 72 of these Dreamliners. And so I feel confident about the 49 coming in, and maybe the 72, it looks good, but we'll kind of see what happens with that upstart.
That's kind of weird because basically they're both state owned.
Mm-hmm.
So why would the state launch another brand, I guess, of passenger travel? I don't know if one is supposed to be international and one more regional, but that's kind of odd to me, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it is to help sort out some of the orders there. I don't know. But
it also comes a week after Boeing CEO David Calhoun lost his $7 million bonus. If you guys remember, that was because of the trouble they were having with the 777 jetliner and it not making it to market by the end of the year. I mean, let's not worry. He still made like $22.5 million last year.
goodness.
But, I mean, it's kind of difficult if you're the CEO to be like, all right, I get it. You're going to take my $7 million bonus, but we just landed this like $37 billion deal.
I think they can just look at a couple of little lawsuits they still got pending over some jetliners that didn't land the way they were supposed to, shall we say?
Understandable.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess this week was up for Boeing, so we'll see what happens next week.
Next week, yeah.
Make our top 5. All right. Our next most popular story. Commercial EV maker Arrival burning through cash. Arrival is a new startup that makes commercial electric vehicles. For now. The company's latest financials show it burning through cash. Arrival lost $597 million during the fourth quarter of 2022. That includes $406 million in charges and write-offs. The losses likely pushed the company's full-year total losses past $1 billion. Billion with a B. Make sure to enunciate that one. Earlier this year, the company announced plans to cut staff by 50% to 800 employees. Jeff, the company still plans to start building an electric van for the U.S. market at its micro factory in Charlotte starting next year. So they remain confident despite some pretty historic losses and cost cutting when it comes to layoffs.
Yeah, interesting company. When you dig into these guys a little bit, let's start with some of the good stuff first.
Yeah.
They did also announce another $300 million in equity financing that came through this week. So they did get a little bit of replenishment into the coffers, even though they burned through that much money. I was also surprised to see the workforce that large for a startup.
Agreed.
When you have that many people, almost 1,500 people working for you, that's a lot, but it is an auto company as well that they're trying to build here. A couple of other things I think are really interesting when you look at their strategy in terms of manufacturing. They have what they call their micro factory, which essentially what they want to do, as opposed to building these huge plants in one fixed location, they want to look at where their product is selling and basically design the plant around that product for that geography. So as opposed to the assembly line process, there you have robotics where you're building the vehicle one by one in a sort of micro factory, if you will, a bunch of different robotics going to put the car together. So they feel that can help reduce costs as well, which is very interesting approach. And you could see that working. Some of the other good things or interesting things that they have going is they're actually selling things, what they call their elements, which are the different chargers, different battery, different electrical components that they make and brand themselves. So it's very interesting there as well. If you're looking to support all the stuff that they're doing, you can buy your own stuff if you want to go that route. I thought that was also different and unique. Here's where we get to some of the areas where you can see why they're burning through so much cash, though, because they're very scattered to me. It feels like they're throwing a lot of stuff against the wall, and you can appreciate that from a startup perspective. But in addition to a car, which they're trying to position more for ride sharing, like they're partnering with Uber and trying to figure some stuff out, It's an interesting looking vehicle. It's not going to be a high consumer demand because it's pretty boxy looking. It's pretty straightforward.
They're making it to be a cab.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. They're also focused on public transit with buses, electric buses, and then they've also got their the passenger van that you alluded to, also kind of for a ride sharing type situation. And then in addition to that, they also do like custom cars. They're working with Ford to do like electric custom Mustangs.
Okay.
So that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
What do you focus on? What do you get really good at? What are you really hanging your hat on? They've got a deal with UPS for 10,000 of these vans. So that's a positive thing. You could also see cash flow coming in there. Where's that cash flow going? What are you selecting to replenish? What area of your business is your strength? And if you try to appease all those masters right from the start, you're not going to be great at anything. That's going to be really difficult to do. I think what Arrival needs to do is if they've got this great technology and they've got this really unique and innovative strategy and approach, pick something first.
Yeah.
Okay. They have put out a passenger van. Maybe just really focus on that for the time being and not worry about this other stuff. It's great to have that in development, but if you're just starting out, focus, I think, would lend well to what they're dealing with right now.
Well, and it makes sense when you're a startup, see what hits,
Yeah.
you know? But with the passenger van, it sounded like they were going to not only develop that for ride sharing, but also the was it mid-range logistics?
Yeah, last mile.
Delivery van, not passenger van. My bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could see them hopefully, and we've seen this a lot with startups, Anna, where they're throwing spaghetti against the wall, and as they start cutting costs, they focus on the one thing that might be the shining light. But sometimes a lot of these players don't pivot until it's too late.
Right. They burn through so much capital getting there that they can't quite reach the finish line. Yeah. And, I think Jeff and I are in agreement, too, that the headline saying that a EV startup is burning through cash is sort of like saying, the sky is blue. Obviously, we know that, it's not uncommon even for established automakers to struggle. It's a hard business to be in. Ford, they just posted a 90% profit loss in Q4. If auto production were easy, you wouldn't see that kind of variability,
right?
For a company that's been on the market for more than 100 years. Where this gets real for me is with these job cuts that indicate that perhaps there's more happening than just some growing pains here. I agree, Jeff, that I think maybe they are trying to do too much here, and this market, as it matures, is going to get more and more competitive. And I believe we're already seeing that. And there's just going to be simply fewer pieces of that pie. So any stumble is going to be potentially detrimental, I think, to a company that's trying to meet the market, right? And it does seem with all these EV startups out there that there's going to be some kind of maybe natural correction at some point as some of these up-and-comers are just going to get called. I think so many of these new companies in this sector, especially, they're really like maybe one contract away from make or break. And obviously you get a massive boost when you're, say, a Rivian and Amazon puts some money into you and there's that vote of confidence that they're taking a chance on you, and that's very public. If you don't get something like that right away, or you get something and you're not able to fulfill it, that could be enough to put a company like this under. And I do think that like some of these contracts as they go, it's not just these startups competing against each other. Like established automakers are starting to sign these deals as well. And that's the scary part. Like, so Stellantis signed a deal with Amazon to provide Ram ProMaster electric delivery vans. DHL has a deal with Volvo. It's not really a market of may the best startup win. There's really getting to the point where there's maybe some saturation there. And there's so many pressures, like just not just external pressures, but like also the competitive landscape is just insane. So I do think that we are going to see an acceleration of some of these smaller startups getting picked off. And I hate to take such a pessimistic tone on this, but I just feel like that's inevitable. And, as Jeff said, Arrival did just get this $300 million infusion of cash. They are looking, analysts are looking at that as like maybe a way to slow this bleeding down, but even their executives are saying it's not enough to build this van. So unfortunately for them, I just think that they need more than what they got.
Are you guys surprised? Jeff, I'll start with you. Are you surprised that we're not seeing more of these startups be bought up or acquired by other automakers? Do you think automakers are either more hesitant because of how volatile the market is, they're confident because of their own internal R&D, or are they know the numbers and they're just going to wait for them to go under so they can buy up their IP?
Well, I don't think there's even a rush to buy up the IP. I think a lot of this technology is already known. Yeah. And it's really putting a different twist or turn on it, putting your stamp on it. When you look again at the ride-sharing vehicle or the vans or the buses, they look a little different. Yeah. There's a little bit of a different corporate strategy involved, again, with them selling what they call their elements or the different components that are involved in these vehicles. But at the end of the day, the electric vehicle, I mean, the construction, the infrastructure for it isn't that diverse where you would seek somebody out. Yeah. Now, maybe later, if they were first, okay, you could have seen way early on GM or Ford or whomever looking at Tesla and going, you know what? Maybe we'll grab those guys now and save some R&D down the road. At this point, they've got so much R&D invested in electric, hybrid, hydrogen, everything else you can imagine. No, they're not going to look at these startups. And I think the sad thing is, unless these startups can really take something like they got this deal with UPS and just get there fast, pour everything into it, get them out the door, show they have a proven product that can deliver and handle all of those different criticisms that come with electric vehicles, cost, durability, cold weather, all that. That's how you're going to get your foot in the door. Otherwise, I don't really see it happening for them.
Well, I mean, Anna, maybe the deal with UPS as well as some of the IP around their micro factory, maybe that would be enough to lure a potential buyer because they'd want to get a foot in the door with UPS.
I mean, maybe, but a lot of automakers have a foot in the door with UPS. Ford has a deal with them. Stellantis just signed a deal with them. Yeah. I just don't. I agree completely with what Jeff said. I don't think that there's a rush to do this. I think that the partnerships and the IP and the development is galvanizing at this point. I think it's too late for somebody to come in like that and say, are you interested in our, I mean, look at how many automakers have teamed up with other companies already on batteries, on vehicles, on, everything under the sun to make this happen, chargers. So I just don't think that there's room for that anymore.
And it is kind of too bad because I think, and we're going to talk about this a little bit on in some other stories, but I think a lot of these companies like a UPS, DHL, whomever, want to be diverse in who they're working with. Yeah, they are wanting these companies to succeed, but at the same time, they got a business to run too. They can't prop them up.
Yeah. Talking about that $30 million lifeline that they acquired, that was from Westwood Capital. But Anna, you kind of alluded to this. Their CEO, Igor Torgov, came out and said, we still need more capital. We need to find more efficiencies, but we're going to continue to develop and validate our vehicles. And they're still having, one of the red flags for me was when he said, we're still having encouraging conversations with potential partners and investors. I mean, that sounded like more layoffs to me. And one thing that I wanted to watch, though, is that Arrival has a plan to build 10 of these vans at a UK microfactory by August 2023. That's to further develop the highly automated factory process and integrate them with the company's autonomous mobile robots. So these vans will then be used for testing. I think that it could be really interesting to see this as a make or break scenario for them, where if this goes well and they find out something that it can be replicated in their Charlotte factory, or this just doesn't work and maybe they go away quickly. I feel like we're seeing more and more of these startups that are kind of, I don't want to say fly by night, but they have a glimpse at it, a glimpse at the main. Are we just closer to it than ever? Or do you guys feel like in automotive right now, because of the EV push, we're seeing more of them than ever?
I think there's a couple different factors. First of all, when we see these new companies come out, we want them to succeed. We really do. We buy the hype, I guess you could say. We get excited about it. Obviously, investors do as well. You want to see somebody who's excited about a new concept and a new idea that has benefits potentially when you're looking just economically, if it's lower cost with that micro factory strategy, if that can lower the cost of an EV, not just for you and I, but also for mass transit. That's exciting. That's something you want to see succeed. But then when you start getting to the nuts and bolts and these folks, again, figure out, holy cow, it is tough to build a vehicle. the reality sets in, and because we've seen so many of these sort of come and go, we just realize that's part of the landscape right now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and think about how much extra time Tesla had to try and fail because there wasn't like 15,000 competitors breathing down their necks.
And they failed for a while.
They did. Yeah, they did.
Yeah. All right. Our next most popular story. Oshkosh challenges a $231 million Army contract. Wisconsin-based Oshkosh Defense last week announced a formal bid protest with the U.S. Government Accountability Office after the U.S. Army awarded a follow-on contract valued at $230.9 million to a competitor. In early February 2023, the U.S. Army picked South Bend, Indiana-based AM General to build some 20,000 Joint Light Tactical Vehicles and around 10,000 trailers. Oshkosh and AM were the only two bidders for the contract, and Tim Bleck, president of Oshkosh Defense, says he has, quote, significant concerns over the process. According to Bleck, the concerns come after Oshkosh participated in the government's post-award debriefing process. He says the government didn't, quote, properly review the financial, technical, and manufacturing capabilities offered to select the best value and lowest risk solution to deliver the JLTV. AM General won the 5-year contract with an additional 5-year option to make these JLTVs and trailers. AM's going to manufacture them at the company's 96-acre Mishawaka manufacturing campus in Indiana. Deliveries are scheduled to begin in mid-2024 with an estimated contract completion date in February 2023. Anna, this surprised me a little bit because whenever we talk about the JLTV, we're always talking about Oshkosh Defense. And this one time a contract goes to a competitor, I can understand why they fight the contract, but they make a good case in terms of, hey, we've been doing this for a long time. There's no way they can beat us on efficiencies.
True. I think it's hard for Oshkosh to not challenge this. Even if they had no leg to stand on, it's worth it to challenge it because this is such a substantial piece of business for them. Oshkosh did $1 billion in sales of JLTVs last year alone. And the contract makes up for nearly half of the company's annual defense sales. And honestly, about 12% of their annual sales as a company. So
that's a big risk.
It's a big, big amount of money at stake here. These vehicles cost about $400,000 a piece. There's a lot riding on this. Even further comes the speculation that losing this contract could have a major impact on the Oshkosh operation, including jobs. Is there enough government work to come to make up for this without compromising the workforce after they get through their backlog? We don't know. But let's be clear. Oshkosh faces some very long odds with this GOA challenge. Of the 1,658 cases filed last year, only 59 were sustained, putting the success rate of a challenge at about 3.5%.
That's honestly higher than I thought it was.
In general, yeah. So turning these decisions over doesn't happen much, obviously. Though Oshkosh, if anyone, I think has at least a decent slate of evidence here, having developed this tech themselves, having both the manufacturing capabilities, the workforce, the know-how there. That said, the government is saying that pricing is a major factor here. And since pricing bids aren't made publicly available until the protest window is closed, we have really no idea how far apart these two bids were. Is it possible that Oshkosh, having invested in developing this, producing these since 2015, maybe got a little too comfortable in their position and padded this a little bit? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe thought this was like, you know, business forever. And so, but we don't know that. Like, we don't know, and we won't know until this more comes out, I think, in coming months. We'll just have to watch this story. But I think the only silver lining for Oshkosh is that they have a huge backlog on these right now. So they're still going to be producing these for like another 18 months to get through that. So if they lose their appeal, at least they have a year and change possibly to try to figure out, can we keep this factory going? Do we have enough other government work to make up for the loss here?
Jeff, because Oshkosh Defense is a Wisconsin company, I feel like an Oshkosh homer, you know? But I do, you know, I am kind of conflicted because at least the contract for AM General is leading to a boon for the Indian economy. Like they have this brand new 96-acre campus. There was a huge unveiling where a bunch of officials came to kind of show it off after they won the contract. So at least, not a silver lining, but at least all of this work is staying in the U.S. And, another thing that I wanted to point out, and I wanted to get your thoughts on, do you think that maybe AM came in knowing they might take a loss on this just to try and win over more JLTV business?
I mean, it's definitely possible. I think Anna's absolutely right. I think pricing was a huge part of this. Now, the Army can't come out and say that.
Yeah.
But I think another part of this, as we were just talking about with Arrival, I think the Army may have also looked at diversifying their supply chain a little bit here too.
Which they've talked about is a big issue for them.
Yeah, I mean, Oshkosh, in addition to the JLTV, provides obviously a number of different vehicles for the Army. So not putting all your eggs in one basket could definitely factor into the decision here.
Yeah.
I think there may have also been some tactical reasons behind this. When the JLTV first came out, so basically if you look on the spectrum of vehicles in the military, okay, let's say you got a tank on one end and an SUV on the other, okay? The Humvee was ideally sort of in the middle. That's what AM General is known for. That's what they put out. They produced the Humvee. Probably a little more tank than SUV.
Yeah.
The JLTV was meant to be a little more SUV than Hummer or tank, okay? And that was because of the terrain. We were in the Middle East. There's a lot of urban warfare. We needed to be quicker, faster, ideally lighter, but also have enough armor to protect against IEDs and things of that nature. So the JLTV worked there. However, there were some reliability issues that came up. Now, that's the case with any new product when it's introduced, but there were some concerns, especially with brakes and tires. Okay? Pretty big deal.
Yeah, important
ones.
Now, for the most part, they corrected a lot of those issues, but that still has to stick with a lot of people who were in that theater thinking back to when that JLTV came out going, you know, it wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
And if we've got a new supplier here who does have a proven product, who also is somebody that's offering us a little bit better price, why don't we try this? I think that may have been part of it. The other thing is when we look at, and I know this is like the third week I've brought this up, I'm not trying to be a warmonger here or anything, but our next big adversary is China. And we're looking at going to the Pacific. We need a little bit more of an amphibious type of vehicle, not the JLTV. That's where something that's a little bit more potentially like a Humvee could come into play. So as you look at, and we don't know what AM General's version of the JLTV is going to look like, I would suspect it's going to be a little bit bigger. It's going to be a little bit heavier. There may be more armor on it, and it's going to be better suited for more of an amphibious environment as opposed to quicker, faster, being able to maneuver in these urban environments that we needed in the Middle East. So I think there was a lot of different factors here that went into it. I'm kind of with you. I don't think Oshkosh's chances are very good in turning this over for all those reasons.
So AM General, as you mentioned, has a long-standing partnership with the U.S. Army. They make 5-ton trucks, 2.5-ton trucks, and of course the Humvee family of vehicles that you mentioned. And they did mention some of the tech enhancements that they plan on offering that kind of set AM apart from the competition, at least according to AM anyways.
Sure.
Some of the things they plan to bring to the table include better corrosion protection, improved fuel efficiency, as well as advancements and developments that are going to come to the next generation vehicle architecture. And I mean, I understand why you go with a different vendor to try and add new features that were otherwise lacking. As the incumbent manufacturer and original designer for the JLTV, Oshkosh believes that its experience and established production infrastructure stood above the competition, and the ruling is planned for June 2023. So we should hear from the GAO soon. And who knows, maybe Oshkosh is going to wind up being the 3%.
Maybe,
I mean, it was surprising when you heard, because you always associated them with this vehicle type.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a surprise, but we've laid out the case, I guess.
Well, let's move on to a new case. The Honda patents motorcycle airbag that detaches with rider in crash. In a recent patent filing, Honda showed off a new motorcycle airbag concept that mounts to the bike. The concept already exists, but previous iterations have some drawbacks. According to Cycle World, previous designs require riders to be sitting in very predictable positions and work best in head-on collisions. And these other wearable devices, like vests, often limit clothing options and are limited in size. I mean, there are some big bikers on our roads. Honda's new patent combines the two. A vehicle-mounted device that triggers a mechanism to wrap around the driver in the event of a crash. The airbag travels with the rider throughout the accident instead of staying with the bike. While the patent details two different options for the placement of the inflator, both focus on the airbag's protection of the rider's chest. The product's feasibility and potential success comes down to whether or not the airbag can be inflated fast enough to envelop the rider in an accident. Anna, we've covered a lot when it comes to motorcycle safety. And I think that there's a portion of the population that just accepts a motorcycle as an inherently dangerous mode of transportation. But it's still encouraging to see larger bike makers like a Honda still trying to make it a safer commute for its customers.
For sure. I thought this was really fascinating because I'm not really a motorcycle person, if that's surprising to anyone.
Did you sell your crotch rocket?
I don't have a hog of any kind.
I'm gonna need that. I'm gonna need that timestamp. No.
But it got me thinking because the first thing I thought of when I saw this, as it comes to the safety equipment and PPE that's available to people now, is not ideal because it comes down to an issue that impacts manufacturers daily, which is wearability, right? Mm-hmm. We see that stuff all the time. We know protective gear is only as effective as people's willingness to wear it. And I think the problem, at least in the industrial environment, has gotten even more difficult with the advent of advanced technology, digital devices. Like maybe you can tolerate a pair of gloves when you're turning a wrench, but when you're trying to plug in something into a handheld device or swipe across a touch screen, that's just not helpful for you to wear. It's not convenient. So I think PPE manufacturers in particular in our market that we've seen, they've really kind of gone beyond the call. They've stepped up to modify their offerings to adapt to this. But I still think that there are challenges around, developing glasses that don't fog up or hurt your ears, helmets that don't slip, gloves that have touch pads that don't make your hands sweaty, all that stuff. In the case of Honda, as a leader in the motorcycle industry, and they have a track record of really developing a lot of safety technology as it relates to the wearable stuff, the airbags and stuff like that. But they're always obviously looking for ways to make bikes safer because if you think about it, safety is probably one of the biggest barriers for purchase for them. Mm-hmm. If you look at the conversations that people are having with their spouse or their parents or their kids or whatever about why or why not someone should have a motorcycle, that's probably front and center, right? Mm-hmm. So if they can come up with a way to create a device that makes it easier for them to sell motorcycles, then great, let's make it work. The report talks about how wearable vests are a challenge because essentially people don't like wearing them.
Yeah.
They're probably hot, I'm guessing. Yeah. People tend to ride their motorcycles in the summer. Yeah. They don't fit everyone well, I'm sure.
It's like riding a bike with a life jacket.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so if you can take that out of the equation where you're not having to don something and then, ride your bike, then this could be a major win, I think, for motorcycle safety. Not to mention, and to coin a Jeff phrase for a second.
Oh, here we go.
Could this be the thing that leads to the thing? Like when it comes to expanding out protective gear to other areas, like imagine something like this built into like a pedal bicycle, for example. Because that's like, that can be scary stuff. Or, like something that could detect chemicals in your vicinity and could wrap around you in sort of like a face shield, it's sort of like an on-demand version of PPE. And the concept of that is super exciting to me. I'm curious to see how far that could go. Because obviously there's application for it. There would be need for it. So if technology can predict or identify when an accident is occurring, could it also identify when a trip and fall is happening? Because that's such a huge, So I don't know. It just it got my mind kind of going a little bit about how this could be utilized maybe in other areas. And so I think it's just not only is it cool for road safety, but in general, just seeing some of the efforts that these companies are making to try to make this stuff more wearable, easier to put on, or maybe easier to not think about, which is I think the key to this. So I don't know. Maybe Nope, I'm still not going to get a motorcycle. But
Anna, first of all, I am shocked that you're taking the futuristic outlook and not the hard and fit. How's this going to impact us now? That's amazing.
Well, I mean, we're getting a question in from Eric, a listener who's asking if these will work for mopeds. Well, Eric, maybe, except you'd have to get a brand new Honda version of that, which...
Yeah. I mean, I guess they'll work for mopeds, and they'll help prevent all those people who fall over sideways.
I don't think...
mopeds while standing.
Yeah, I don't think there's really an aftermarket airbag, but...
But it could be, because the way that this patent reads, it's essentially the seat. And so, like
That's
you
true.
say, when you talk about the applicability to bicycles and other safety devices, you know, a lot of attention has been put on the helmet. And so we've got the helmet. That's why this is so focused on the chest. You know, we've figured out the head. Now we got to protect the rest of the body. And if this could be a part that you could kind of add, you know, to your bicycle or, you know, a bar stool to help people in the event of a fall. You know, hey, they're...
I mean, I've never been there.
It happens.
No. It happens to people, none of us. None of us ever.
No.
Jeff,
Las Vegas.
were you also shocked that Anna thought about how this could be the thing that leads to the thing?
Anna is a very evolved thinker. That was not surprising at all, David. I don't know why you would even...
I believe you're being facetious, Jeff.
I don't know where that comes from.
Rude.
Taking the high road, Jeff.
I'm an evolved thinker,
Sure.
David.
You're an evolved practical thinker, yes.
I think Anna's on the cusp of teaching kids how to ride a bike without training wheels.
Oh
So
my
this
God.
probably came front and center,
Yeah.
which wouldn't be the worst thing.
I just want to wrap them up in bubble wrap, and this is like an invention that does that. So
Very true. That's maybe the difference between a mom and a dad.
yeah,
Dad
He'll
says,
be
go.
fine.
he'll be fine.
Yeah.
Don't look back.
He learns from the road rash.
We all did.
Yeah.
Two things came to mind when going over the story. Really interesting for, I did think about the vest we've talked about in the past. That was sort of a natural connection. Also thought about the different body types riding motorcycles and how this would adapt to that. Because if you're looking at something that essentially gives you a hug and wraps itself around you, we're built a little different.
Yeah.
So that'll be a thing. It'll be interesting to see how they navigate that. The other thing was, this is like a seatbelt. How do you handle that patent? Okay, so I was curious a little bit about that. Now, maybe everybody knew this, but in 1959, a Volvo engineer named Niles Boland developed the modern three-point seatbelt. It was patented. Volvo never enforced the patent. So if this does take off, Honda will maybe potentially have to cross that bridge too.
Right.
Like if this is that successful, because I could see this working. If they can get it to deploy correctly and actually wrap around somebody, it's hard to see how this wouldn't work in keeping somebody safe. It makes sense, especially if you're wearing a helmet. I mean, you've protected the two biggest vulnerabilities there. So it'll be interesting to see again what road Honda takes in that respect too, in terms of do they enforce their patent or let everybody do it.
Well, it could be something where they're first to market and then they offer it, or same thing in terms of maybe they offer it aftermarket. Because I could see. I mean, for as amazing of a product as this is, I think of the bikers in my life and how they would push back on something like this.
Well, and depending on what, is it an extra, I don't know, when you buy a new Honda, is it an extra $1,000 to put this on? So you're like, nah, I don't want that type of thing. Or if it works, again, does it just become standard equipment?
Yeah. Looking at the patents, it has two primary versions. And both of them fire from the seat, as we mentioned before. But in the event of an accident, you likely don't care about the secondary discomfort. A lot of that was mentioned, just like it's got to be comfortable. Like whereas with a wearable vest, that's uncomfortable, and you just decide not to put that on. Whereas when you're careening into a tree, and an uncomfortable hug comes around you to save your life,
Too
you're just
tight.
like,
You're yelling as you.
it's pinchy. Like
As you're sliding across the asphalt.
Yeah. It definitely does remind me a little bit of the foam from Demolition Man. But
I was thinking about that too, yeah.
One of these versions puts the airbag and its inflator in the front of the bike seat, and it fires upward between the legs. So you're gonna have some discomfort. Again, life-saving discomfort, but it's gonna wrap around your torso and or shoulders, again, focusing on the chest. The second variant fires from the rear of the seat. Again, discomfort, life-saving discomfort.
David is really focused on comfort. This.
I'm just saying,
Not the discomfort caused by,
David, you
hitting
need-
a pole.
I understand that it's going to be a
need a
hard sell
blanket?
when they're like, in the event of an accident, there's going to be a small explosion in your crotch to save your life. Like, that's a hard sell.
Well, I wouldn't like use that marketing terminology.
No, but as they're explaining it to me, I'm just gonna be like, yeah. So, okay, in the event that my bike goes down, there's an explosion in my pants that saves me.
Wow, that is a leap.
And then David,
look at the pictures in the patent.
yeah, David wants the airbag to then serve him a nice hot cup of hot cocoa afterwards.
I mean, you're already straddling a gas tank.
Yeah.
So
No, I understand. I'm just saying.
no, you don't.
I mean, I get it. The airbag.
death is preferable.
It's not preferable. I'm
Apparently.
just saying, we should look at the mild discomfort. When it, the one that fires from your butt wraps around forward around the rider, going under the arms to protect the chest. One thing that I kind of envisioned is like when a person's falling, and if you're behind somebody, either how you catch them. I don't know. I think this was genius technology. All joking aside, if this could actually be perfected, it could be revolutionary, because we have covered the vests that either tether to your bike or use Bluetooth and they don't fire until that connection is lost. Right. They're a little bit cruder than this.
Yeah.
And it's encouraging. All right. I am pro airbag.
Are you in any minor discomfort right now?
Oh my
Because you
God.
seem to be.
Do you want to
seem be
pause the
hitting on
podcast
that
and just
really
go
strongly.
get some air?
No. Well, I mean, always, because this room is on fire.
It's not comfortable.
It's cozy. It is a cozy production studio.
It's a cozy 95 in here.
But I'm more comfortable than if there was an explosion under the desk. Anyway, our most popular story this week.
Excellent transition.
We got to do something with those old Takata inflators anyways. We'll just use them for practical jokes. Our most popular story this week, GM offers buyouts to most U.S. salaried workers to trim costs. General Motors will offer buyouts to most of its 58,000 U.S. salaried workers. Some executives are included as the automaker is looking to trim costs. GM previously announced that it needed some $2 billion in cuts by the end of next year. The company wants to get ahead of any possible future firings. The offer is for white-collar workers with at least 5 years of service and global execs with the company at least 2 years. Workers are being offered 1 month of pay for every year of service up to 12 months. They'll also be offered Cobra Healthcare and part of the bonuses they would receive this year. And a GM is working through a transition as to try and sell only EVs by 2035. And I think this was something we all saw coming, but maybe not as soon.
Well, they're blaming the EVs, but they're also blaming the economy and concerns that they have for softness in their markets going into the next year or two. So that's the dual nature of this. But I thought of you when I read this because I know you love how the
corporate speak.
The corporate speak and the language that they use. And this one was particularly insulting, I thought. They really couched the buyout as like an opportunity. And what was this voluntary program offers eligible employees an opportunity to make a career change or retire earlier.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's like that conversation from, was it Up in the Air? The George Clooney movie.
Oh, yeah.
Where he goes around firing people.
Oh, man, we should see if they just stole it right from the movie.
Yeah.
You shouldn't see this as you're losing your job. This is an opportunity for a fresh start. Make yourself happy. You are miserable here.
Frank, I see you like woodworking. How'd you like to do it full time? So GM's obviously, this is voluntary, right? But GM is strongly encouraging workers to take it. Of course, this is concerning. So GM announced that they'd be looking at cutting costs when they release their fourth quarter and year-end earnings in January, which were, by the way, a record of $14.5 billion in income for the year. Record. But as any publicly traded company would, they're trying to get ahead and hedge against future risk by cutting costs now so they don't create headwinds for their shareholders. I know that they're also saying they don't want to have to actually fire people, but so maybe that's part of it too. But meanwhile, this cost cutting is just the tip of the iceberg, reportedly. So I think GM is trying to control the narrative here. They're calling this attrition. They're not calling it layoffs. Obviously, they're trying to accelerate that attrition. And I think the risk here when you're offering this option of what I've described as most of the company's 58,000 workers is that they're also the most experienced. As you mentioned, this applies to workers with 5 years or more experience in regular white collar positions, and then executives with 2 or more years experience. To me, I think it raises some questions about what the results could be of a brain drain over the longer term, especially when you're in the process of a complete line overhaul. GM's statement was this, quote, "By permanently bringing down structured costs, we can improve vehicle profitability and remain nimble in an increasingly competitive market." Cool, but but like, what did all these people do? You know, I find it concerning when companies make these broad cuts and they kind of brush over them and act like all these people are just pencil pushers.
Yeah.
Like, what are they doing though? Because to me, it's concerning to think about maybe as a consumer, should we be concerned about product quality as they're rolling out all this new stuff? I mean, where are the cuts coming from? Testing, design? It's so hard to know. I wish they were a little bit more clear about that. And, even if like most of the cuts are coming from marketing and HR, is like what they would say. But if they're for most of your white collar employees are being offered this, and the people who've worked there the longest, I don't know if I want to get into a GM autonomous vehicle after that. It's just sort of concerning to me. Arguably, I think that this is a time that you'd maybe want the most brain power in multiple layers at your company as you're trying to roll out all this new stuff. Because I think that the implication that all these people walking out the door are just hanging around. I don't know. It's just sort of this inaccurate assumption that maybe there is some fallout that we could expect later. But I don't know. I mean, we'll just have to see.
Jeff, do you think GM is kind of hanging its hat on the fact that they can say these are internal combustion engine focused workers that just won't translate? But in the same conversation, they have problems with labor shortages. You would think that maybe these were people you would try to upskill into your new EV future rather than just.
Well, again, these are white collar focus. So I think I don't think there's an apples to apples comparison there. I get where you're coming from.
Okay.
In terms of the job market being much more competitive.
You're going to need like white collar workers that do EVs also.
Agreed. Here's what I think where a lot of this comes from. Number one, I think auto companies do not have a clue what is going to happen in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. I think they are very paranoid. They don't know how inflation is going to play out. They don't know how the supply chain issue is going to play out in terms of chips and growing electronics, rare earths, all the stuff that they need for batteries, for the EVs. I think there's a lot of cloudiness in terms of what the future holds. So as a result, they're doing some things to kind of shore up the coffers a little bit, make sure shareholders don't start panicking if they do have some bad quarters, some bad financial returns for a while. Now, what's going to be interesting is how many people actually take this buyout. Yeah. GM actually did this in 2018 as well. Okay. They did the same thing. They targeted fewer people. They targeted people with more experience. So it was a smaller pool, but they were shooting to get between 35 to 40% of people they were anticipating taking the buyout. Ended up being closer to 20. Okay, now if 20% of the people they're targeting here take this, that is a huge drop in their workforce. Yeah. And all the points you bring are very valid in terms of what does this do from a brain drain. But there could also be the thought that if these folks don't want to be here, let's not wait to have to fire them. Let's let them go now, and then we'll figure it out at potentially a lower cost employee because they haven't been there as long, an entry level employee. I think that's what really is the crux of all of this. A lot of uncertainty and a lot of let's just get ready because we don't know what the future holds.
Yeah. I mean, but a lot of the companies that we see succeed through uncertainty are the ones that are investing and kind of seeing it through the crisis rather than just, you know what, shed it all.
Well, I don't think they're saying shed it all. They're basically they're saying we're going to worry about the technology, not as much about the manpower. Because and again, it's not. Again, I think there's a lot of lines being blurred between what's white collar and what's blue collar. Okay, somebody in an EV lab, that's not the same as a marketing exec. Right. Okay, so I think there's, like I said, I don't think that's as cut and dry as it was in the past in terms of who that would be from our perspective and how we define it. They may be defining that a little bit differently.
That's true. Maybe they are. But It would be good to know what that is. Like,
Yeah.
what positions are we talking about that they're willing to cut of 58,000 workers most?
Because you know it's not HR and marketing, because that's the one they'd call out. It's mostly HR and marketing.
Right.
So this EV transition still requires more R&D and huge capital expenditures. So I understand, like you said, Jeff, shore up the coffers. One thing that you're talking about is what is white collar and what is blue collar. I found this really interesting article about how, white collar jobs are becoming more scarce.
Mm-hmm.
There's also increasing leverage for blue collar workers. Do either of you see these white collar workers transitioning to more of a blue collar role?
I don't know. I just, it'll be interesting to see what happens next for GM because, Jeff mentioned the 2018 cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference then was that they also closed 2 plants. And so they did cut blue collar jobs at that
Mm-hmm.
time. Right now, the manufacturing industry, though, is so strong
Mm-hmm.
and there's still a lot of factory jobs being added that I don't know if that's in the cards. They got a lot on their plate in terms of producing all these new vehicles. So it'll be interesting to see, just the strength of the blue collar side of the business
Mm-hmm.
and how those factories will hopefully remain intact in terms of their workforce. But secondly, are there opportunities there and will people take them? Is that a transition that is easily made? I don't know.
Well, and I'm not just talking about GM here, Jeff, but like we've seen, Meta shed another 10,000 jobs this week.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see, is that even conceivable that these people would consider what is traditionally considered blue collar work?
Okay, so I do think, yes, I do. Okay, so first of all, say if you've been at GM for 15 years, which puts you starting right around when things were really bad, 2008. Things were bad. These car companies were going before Congress looking for support. These companies were running super lean. Then we went through this boom. Car companies were selling more vehicles than they ever did before. So you needed all the support mechanisms in place to support all of that activity. So there was potentially an inflation of staff, whether it is customer service, whether it is sales support, marketing, whatever it is. Okay. In all of those cases, if you're going to sell any product, you need people supporting it. So there could have been a boom there. Now we're seeing some of those numbers drop again. 2020 was a horrible year, right? Nobody was buying cars because we couldn't make them, because we couldn't keep people in factories. We're seeing vehicles last a lot longer than they have in the past. We're seeing used cars grow and escalate in value. So with all those different factors involved, you could see Ford saying, you know what, we were selling all those cars. We maybe don't need this many people, okay? So this is a way to transition from that. It's also just, I think a lot of those people that were hired during that time, if they can say, okay, so let me get this straight. I can get paid by Ford for a year and go maybe take a managerial job at Home Depot where when I go home at night, I'm done.
Yeah.
I think that could be appealing.
Yeah.
I think there is a potential possibility for that group that was hired during that time to look at this as an opportunity to do something new in a less stressful environment. So yeah, I do think there is a group that would transition to more of a blue collar role. Not at Ford though.
Yeah.
I don't think they're
GM.
going to GM, excuse me.
So one new theory that I saw, and initially I thought it was kind of ridiculous, but then as I read about it, it made a little bit of sense, is what they're calling new collar.
Ooh.
Have you guys heard about this?
What's the new
No,
collar?
It's causing me minor discomfort though.
Oh, you better get out of here.
Watch those explosions. So this is a new theory that was floated out by this piece I saw written by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, that modern manufacturing no longer thinks in terms of white or blue collar, but what they're calling new collar. So new collar jobs are safer, more intellectually demanding, and better paid than blue collar jobs that came before them, and should make a career in modern manufacturing more appealing than ever. So do we, like, not only are these huge swaths of manufacturing thriving, but in many factories, it's hard to tell who's working on the shop floor and who's the plant manager.
I agree with that. I think that this is sort of gimmicky, this new collar term, but like the idea of rebranding what a manufacturing job is. I mean, there's all kinds of smart people in this industry trying to do that because it isn't, dirty shop work like people envision it. It's, a collaborative team of many roles, people using high-tech equipment in these very high-tech, clean factories. And so if you want to slap the word new collar on that, I mean,
the world needs another buzzword.
Let's use it. Okay.
Jargon. Jeff, in 21st century manufacturing plants, Everyone's solving problems. Everyone is highly skilled. Everyone is new collar.
Well, I think your progressive manufacturers are already there.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a plant now, there's not a lot of individuals walking around with grease-stained T-shirts and holy jeans and all that kind of stuff. They're professionals because there is a greater level of responsibility for a lot of those roles.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is already happening in a lot of places. I like the fact that we can get a movement behind this to maybe help some of those smaller manufacturers who are sort of stuck in a paradigm of who they expect to be on the shop floor and expanding the thought there. I hate that term with a vengeance. That's absolutely like, we can do better than that, but the concept is 100% accurate. And
we can do better than that.
New collar. Okay, working title. Working title. All right, well, before we jump into In Case You Missed It, we have another word from our new sponsor, Big Commerce. And we're back. Just another reminder that Big Commerce provides modern e-commerce technology that works with your existing systems. ERP, OMS, CRM, no problem. Whatever existing business tools and technologies you use today, Big Commerce can integrate using pre-built one-click integrations or customize your automation with its APIs. Make the move to Big Commerce today. Well, let's make a move to In Case You Missed It, the stories that maybe weren't as popular on our website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, can you start us off with your In Case You Missed It this week?
I sure can. Great. The story I selected this week is titled Caterpillar Workers Ratify New 6-Year Contract with Company. Unionized workers at Caterpillar have approved a new 6-year contract with the company that includes a $6,000 ratification bonus, 19% in pay raises, and 8% worth of lump sum payments. Members of the UAW approved the deal. It covers 7,000 employees in Central Illinois and Pennsylvania, and the new contract is effective immediately. The Irving, Texas company also agreed not to close any factories for the life of the agreement, which is, I believe, 6 years. So I picked this story because we have covered a lot of strikes, especially with off-highway equipment makers like Deere and C&H, where they've had these very protracted, arduous labor talks, strikes, prolonged strikes in some cases. And
C&H was, what, a year?
It was forever. I can't remember how long, but forever. And you know, we have talked, I think, more recently about how long this era of extreme worker leverage in these cases was going to last. And as you see more layoff news coming out, like, is it the end of that? So this group of cat workers had voted nearly unanimously, I think in January, that in the event that an agreement could not be reached, that they were going to strike. Cat clearly did not let it get to that. Reuters acknowledged that the company has been dealing with pressures to their margins on high costs, and probably they would have been challenged, I think, to deal with any kind of a shutdown, and it just was not worth it to them to roll the dice. They gave these workers a good deal. They gave them bumps to their 401ks. Like, there was a lot in there. And ultimately, I think if you look at this situation in the context of the latest jobs numbers for manufacturing, it looks like factory jobs are still generally quite secure. ADP, which is a payroll services company, and they release a monthly report on jobs trends that it comes out usually like a day or two before the Fed, but they're usually pretty close. Anyway, they released their monthly report and said that private payrolls increased 242,000 jobs for the month of February, which was higher than the few months previous to that. And manufacturing accounted for 43,000 job gains. So, yeah. So while there's some hesitancy, I think, around the economy, and perhaps this uncertainty is weighing on business decisions in some sectors, I don't think that's really been the case yet for factory workers. It seems like we're still kind of plugging along there. You know, I think we keep waiting to see a group like this like of union workers just get shut down. And that has not happened yet.
Right. It was also good to see this news come out first thing this week because Caterpillar was about to make a huge splash at ConExpo. And this, I thought, was kind of really great news for the manufacturer as it's kind of about to flex its tech muscles, for
sure.
lack of a better term. You know, they have a huge footprint at ConExpo, and this way they can focus on the technology and not necessarily any sort of impending disruption.
Yeah.
Jeff, your thoughts on Caterpillar ratifying the new contract?
Yeah, I looked at this one too for this part of the podcast, just because it was news because it wasn't news. Sort of a dynamic. They got out ahead of it, and the workers did seem to get what you would call market favorable agreement here. It looked like it was in line with a lot of stuff we saw from CNH and John Deere. It just didn't take them 15 months to figure it out.
Right.
So the fact that they were more progressive, getting ahead of it, it was interesting to see, especially somebody like Caterpillar who just has so much clout, I guess you could say, within this particular sector. So if they can sort of set a benchmark, if you will, in terms of how to respond to workers and deal with unions, that could benefit the entire sector.
Yeah. This is a really good example of why we're having, in case you missed it, because normally anything Caterpillar, top 5, automatic top 5 for the podcast, but it's really good news, so everyone's passing on it. Or like, it's...
Are you dealing cards there?
I don't know what this move is, and I apologize. I am just cutting tomatoes right at my laptop. Yeah, it's like, what was the slicer from the...
Ron Popeil?
Ron Popeil's. Look at this, Jeff. It slices, and it's not, you know what? Look at my fingers. No danger. Yeah.
It can even do julienne.
Yeah, I don't know, and I apologize. I didn't, you noticed it at the exact same moment where I was just like, what are you doing with your hands?
You just kept doing it. You did like, I thought it was going to be like 2 or 3, but then you just like kept going.
No, I'm just going hard with the chops.
I don't know if you were like, no dollar bills or what.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Rain.
I was making it rain, as every Caterpillar worker is about to now, with this new deal.
Nice.
Jeff, what is your,
Well
in case
done.
you missed it this week?
I don't know if I can follow that, but I picked a story on the electric car stores are going to be restricted in Mississippi. Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves signed a bill restricting electric car manufacturers from selling vehicles in person unless they open franchise dealerships. This defies calls from some of his fellow Republicans in the legislature. Basically, the law is going to force electric car companies like Tesla and Rivian to sell vehicles through franchises rather than company-owned stores, which is how they currently operate. We've seen this in other places. We've seen this as an ongoing issue for these EV companies. I think it's one of those things when we look at how we ingratiate ourselves to these electric vehicles and how they make an imprint on society. This is another obstacle that they need to overcome in terms of getting to market. I think it's also interesting because we've seen bigger car makers like Ford say, we want people to do more stuff online so we can just deliver the car and sort of cut out all that time at the dealership. So I understand what Mississippi is doing here, and the thought behind a lot of these type of legislation is they want to protect the dealerships. They want more of these dealerships because they employ people. They support, there's sort of an infrastructure that's built around a lot of them in terms of repair facilities, supplies, all of that. So how are we going to juggle this going forward? Mississippi has said this is what we're going to do. There's been other states who've done the same thing. Are people going to end up like driving, if you're in Wisconsin, are you going to drive to Minnesota so you can go to the Tesla store in order to get your vehicle? How is that going to play out, I guess?
I think when we look, say in the event that we make the full transition to EVs by 2035 or whatever the target is, I think that we're going to look back in time and these are going to be the stains on the transition. I understand it. They're trying to protect their constituents. They're trying to, protect the dealerships. But we're going to look at some of these moves by these states and think they were backwards.
Well, so what I'm wondering is what I could see happening here is just like you can have, maybe this isn't the case, but you can have like an Apple store inside of Best Buy. Are you going to have a Tesla store inside your Ford dealership? Or are they going to, basically...
lease space inside of an existing dealership.
Get real estate within that dealership. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Or are you going to have, again, some of these guys who own every brand type of auto dealership that there's available is going to include Tesla as part of their offerings. How that's going to end up working.
Anna, is this just pre-EV rollout politicking? Is this something that once EVs are a little bit more out in the market is even sustainable?
No, I don't see this lasting forever. And I do think that there will be a lot of barriers to this like working out for them in the end. Because like Jeff said, I mean, I don't know. It's a vehicle's a big purchase. Like, you know, we saw companies like Carvana struggle with like an online only business model. I think people want to drive, especially if it's an emerging tech. You've never bought an EV before. Like people want to drive that. Like it's not that hard for you to find one. But if you can't buy it in Mississippi, then Mississippi doesn't get the sales tax, right? So,
well, what they're saying is they want a dealership.
Yeah,
they don't want a store.
Right, I get that. But like, so if they're not going to,
as a result, Tesla doesn't come to Mississippi.
Yeah, if they're not going to build it, then you're going to have to go somewhere else to get it. And I think people will.
All right. Well, in case you missed it this week, started off as one story and then became two with some new news that came out today. I chose a 3D printed minimalist commune that was planned for West Texas. Caveat, this is a city in Western Texas and not a city called West, Texas, which is real and not in West Texas. Anyway.
David, you didn't by chance get some sort of comment on the website or an email from a reader about that at all, did you?
This is completely unrelated to that comment from a reader who's like, if you want to avoid confusion, you should say that this is actually in Western Texas and not West Texas. West Texas is so confusing that the people that live in the city of West Texas call it West, Texas. That's backwards.
David, when you got the email, did you feel any discomfort at all?
Slight or major?
Yeah, the man gave me a real explosion. Never mind. All right. Now, talking about this minimalist commune first. So last week, this team of designers announced plans to reimagine and rebuild El Cosmico, which is a haven for artists and nomads in Marfa, Texas.
El Cosmico.
El Cosmico, or, maybe El Cosmico, is going to be rebuilt and relocated as part of this expansion to more than 60 acres of land. The centerpiece is going to be new architectural structures that are only possible using large-scale 3D printing. This includes domes, arches, vaults, and parabolic forms. The new El Cosmico plans to break ground in 2024. This was really cool to me because El Cosmico, as it stands now, is a mix of teepees, campers, really Spartan, rustic, nomadic living. And they want to make it bigger and they want to make it kind of cooler with these 3D printed homes or living abodes. And I picked this story because it kind of seemed as like we see a lot of these one-off 3D printed homes as like, okay, it's futuristic tech. It's not here. It'll be great for this artistic commune of hippies in Marfa, Texas, in Western Texas. But then we ran this story today about the largest 3D printed house going up for sale in New York. So when a lot of people think that this is, distant future technology, it's on the market today. So SQ4D, which is a construction technology company, this week listed the largest 3D printed home in the United States for sale. Now, not huge, but this residential property it's huge news, not a huge house. The residential property was printed on site in New York State using SQ4D's autonomous robotic construction system, also known as ARCS, and is the largest 3D printed home to ever hit the market. Right now, it's listed as a new construction at about $500,000. So the largest home is still, 2,000 square feet. It's a mostly modern living space set in approximately a 1/4 acre lot. It has an open floor plan with 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. And another interesting part of this was that 40% of this home was printed on site.
Crazy.
Normally, like other 3D printed homes that we've seen come out, about 8 to 11% of them have been printed on site. So we're seeing an advancement in the technology. We're seeing more of it occur on the site. And, a part of the story with the minimalist commune is that it's also, the designer kind of wants to use it as proof of concept to use 3D printing for affordable housing, which is something that has kind of been, a pipe dream for the industry, the emerging market. And I just thought, this is a really cool emergence. Like it's ready for prime time now. You know, we're going to start seeing more people living in these homes. I encourage people to read both of these stories, including the large printed house going up for sale, because they interview a contractor who talks about having problems with the supply chain, building materials, labor. He's just like, I couldn't make homes anyways, so I pivoted my entire business to 3D printing, and now it's working.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a really interesting case study. And I don't know, Jeff, did you have a chance to check out? I understand if you looked at the 3D printed homes in the hippie commune, you're just like, pass. You know, I mean, it looks like, you know, maybe a Star Wars fan's fever dream with some of those structures, communal spaces, but the large 3D printed home, that's impressive.
I think regardless of the application, what's important is to get a lot of more of these proof of concepts out there so people develop faith in this type of structure. Because there are a ton of benefits. You mentioned supply chain. Over time, maybe not right now, but there's going to be a cost savings there.
Yeah.
Significant one. Environmental benefits, all of that type of stuff. So this is the future. This is potentially a better way of doing it. We don't know that for sure yet, though, until we build and live in a bunch of these places for a while.
Right.
So just to see, again, more of the proof of concepts going up, being used in practical applications, that's encouraging to see where this goes. Yeah.
At some point, I want to live in a 3D printed home that I helped design, because it just, you can get real weird with it inside. And, you know, some people did comment that this $500,000 price point, Anna, that is still, you know, that's high for a lot of people. But there are talks about making these 3D printed subdivisions where the price kind of comes down as a result. You know, this is the first one. It's going to come down. And I mean, you're kind of looking at $500,000 right now for a 2,000 square foot, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, depending on the area.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I think that the scale benefits of factory built are coming, I think, for construction. I mean, you see that, like you pointed out, some of the challenges of building homes custom one at a time. It's just not as efficient as trying to do something modular, 3D printing or building on a factory assembly line part of it and then finishing it on site. I think we're going to see a lot more of that as it goes. And I do think that that is the kind of process where you can find ways to trim the cost overall in the end. So it'd be interesting to see. I agree that this proof of concept needs to be out. I mean, you have to see somebody living in something like this before you're really understanding like that this is a reality. As for El Cosmico, that is Spanish for the cosmic, by the way.
Right
so, lo siento. My Spanish is terrible. I thought it was like, I'd never heard that word before. But yeah, I mean, again, like if you can get people to rally around some of this stuff, like they just have to see it. So the more, even if it's not your thing, I know Jeff's not really a hippie commune kind of dude, but you know, you just have to see it. And so this kind of fulfills that need.
It's no longer like hippie commune. I guess it's like nomadic lifestyle.
Sorry.
No, I mean, I'm learning too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to our final thoughts before we get out of here. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
Oh, I just wanted to say thanks to Andy for filling in for me last week at the very last minute. I had to run because I was sick, but I'm better now. So anyway, ready to face the spring. I refuse to get sick again this winter. Winter's over. I'm done with it.
Well, we're happy that you're back and feeling better because no, but I mean, it's with kids, you're just like, anytime you feel a little bit uncomfortable, you're like, is this real?
I know.
Is this real? No, okay. Maybe I just had too much coffee.
I know. They're like, hey, you want this too? I'm like, no.
Yeah, hug me. Get away from me. You little petri dish.
I licked your pillow. Oh.
My final thought is I just want to thank everybody that's helping us grow the podcast to being one of the most popular podcasts in the manufacturing industry. We really appreciate people sharing it with their community, their coworkers, and other people in the industry that they think that might enjoy it. Also, anyone else, you know, we get a lot of positive feedback from people outside of the industry that also use it as their go-to resource for news. So please continue helping us share the podcast. You know, we really want to work towards people recognizing this as the Today in Manufacturing podcast, which is about manufacturing and not necessarily about these 5 specific topics every week. You know, it is the go-to resource for manufacturing news and analysis every week. Thank you for helping us make that, and please help us continue that push. Jeff, your final thought this week.
A couple of things. First of all, maybe a golf clap for our producer, Alex.
Oh, crushing it.
Behind there, all by his lonesome.
A lot of quick movements. A lot of quick movements, flashing back there.
Good work. Also, I'll be at ProMat coming up here down in Chicago. If anybody sees me, you want to grab a beer, let me know. I'll be down there. So looking forward to that.
Real life Jeff is very tall. You'll see him.
You see him coming.
Also, you're talking about the growing popularity of the podcast. We had the most responses ever
Whoa.
to a podcast poll.
Yes.
This one right here. The one, just to refresh you, is which of the following comebacks are you rooting for the most? We had the DeLorean, the Scout, which we talked about a lot last week, the Hummer, which is David's kind of go-to when he's looking for, the VW Microbus, the Bronco, or the Dodge/Ram Dakota, which actually started really strong on the poll. But giving you some responses here, Melinda said, we need a DeLorean so we can go back to 1980. Not 85, 80. Larry wrote in, he said, the Scout, without a doubt. My first hunting vehicle, and we went places where no man has gone before for use, and where I use a vehicle, it would have to be gas rather than electric. Well, sorry, Larry, that's not going to be the case. But if you want a vehicle to work and play, you can't worry about a lot of those types of things like charging infrastructure. So that's what Larry said. David, this one's for you. This is from your buddy, Chris. He said, had a Scout 2 pickup in high school. Rusty, but I loved it. My brother fell out when the passenger flung open the door. When the passenger door flung open, pulling into school, in the school parking lot. It dragged him through the gravel on his back. That's how he got his nickname, Evil Vic. How about that, cowboy candy?
Oh, my goodness. First of all, I hope your brother was fine. And I was kind of disappointed that he just fell out the door and not through a hole, in the bottom of it.
Yeah, the passenger door was flung open while he was
Evil
driving.
Vic.
Evil Vic.
Man.
He's not letting the cowboy candy nickname go. He's really hoping that catches on.
Let it catch on. I like cowboy candy. Seth continues to make it. It is delicious. Open your mind, Chris, to the cowboy candy.
So Scout was definitely the winner.
Really?
Yes, Scout was the overwhelming winner.
It's so cool, though.
Followed by the VW Microbus.
Yes,
and the DeLorean.
Cannot wait to see those VW buses come out.
Yes. Did anyone come in with a Gremlin?
Not on the list.
There wasn't. You know what? I forgot to look at the other.
Okay. I'm just saying, did we have any?
These are a couple. Well, Myers Mannix. That was one that Ben brought up.
Oh,
Ben Munson brought up. And then Ralph Nader's Chevy Corvair.
I need more people on board with this, although I can do a Chevy Corvair.
No gremlins. Okay. Thank goodness. There is no groundswell for the gremlin.
We're again, like I said, we're building heat. We're building heat right now on this podcast. Do we have another podcast poll coming up next week?
We sure do. So looking at some of the companies we talked about today, I'm curious what you guys feel is the company that's best positioned for the future. We talked about Boeing and some of their new deals, Arrival, the new EV company. See what they're
This is unfair, Jeff.
Oshkosh. I mean, they've lost that one defense contract. See how they're looking. GM, looking at some of their cutbacks to preserve, hopefully, what they got going forward. Or Caterpillar with just signing that new labor deal. Okay. So which one do you think is best positioned for the future?
The 2 companies that had good news or the 3 that had bad?
4 companies that are well established or one that you've never heard of?
Hey, maybe somebody's really excited about Rival. Somebody gave him $300 million.
That's true. So that person,
they're going to
take the poll.
The entire staff at Westwood Capital to vote.
Swing the poll.
Hey, look, I get criticized for beating up on all these EV companies and Elon Musk. I'm just offering them a forum.
All right. Let's hear it for the Arrival. All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Subscribe to our daily newsletter, get it delivered to your inbox first, and join us live on YouTube at IEN Magazine every Thursday as we talk about the 5 biggest stories in manufacturing and create the most popular podcast in the manufacturing industry. Yeah. Bring back the chopping. All right. For Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.
Make it rain tomato slices.
I don't even know.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.